Your fears and more love than you know. Jane swallowed hard, gripping the strap of her backpack as she forced a small nod. The lump in her throat felt impossible to swallow, but she had no choice. This was her reality now. With one last deep breath, she pushed the car door open and stepped out onto the pavement, her heart pounding like a drum in her chest. But Jane had no idea that the day she dreaded so much was about to take an unbelievable turn. That night, when a firm knock echoed through the house, she never expected to open the door and come face to face with none other than Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson himself. What he would say and do next would forever change her life. Before we dive into this powerful and inspiring story, take a moment to drop a comment below. Where are you watching from today? And if you enjoy heartwarming stories like this one, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Now, let's get into it. The early morning sun stretched long golden streaks across the quiet suburban streets as Louis Harper maneuvered the family car through the slow-moving traffic. In the back seat, 12-year-old Jane sat stiffly, her fingers instinctively drifting to the edge of her eye patch, a habit she couldn't seem to break. The weight of uncertainty pressed heavily on her chest. A new school, new faces, new stares. She had been through this before, and the thought of reliving it again made her stomach twist into knots. Her mother, Rebecca, sat in the front passenger seat, her eyes flicking back every so often, filled with a mixture of reassurance and worry. "Mom," Jane's voice came out quieter than she intended, her fingers gripping the strap of her backpack. "What if they laugh at me? What if they don't want to be friends with me?" Rebecca turned slightly in her seat, her face soft but firm. "Sweetheart, I know this is scary. But remember, everyone feels nervous on their first day. And your eye patch? It doesn't define you." Jane swallowed hard, shaking her head. "It's not just today, Mom. You saw what happened at the last two schools. No one sat with me at lunch. They whispered. They stared. I tried so hard, and it never worked." Louis glanced at his daughter in the rearview mirror, his brows drawn together. "I know, kiddo. But this is a fresh start. Give it a chance, okay?" Jane nodded weakly but turned her gaze out the window, her thoughts drifting back to Thailand. "I miss my friends there," she murmured. "Nobody cared about my eye patch. It didn't matter." Rebecca exchanged a glance with Louis before speaking. "Sweetie, Thailand was home. It was what you knew. America is different, but that doesn't mean you won't find your place here too." "She's right," Louis added. "And sometimes, having a few great friends is way better than trying to fit in with everyone." Jane sighed, her breath fogging up the window slightly. It just felt easier there. A brief silence filled the car before Louis cleared his throat. "I know you miss it, Jane. But things have been tough since we moved back. Finding work, keeping up with the cost of living, it's been a challenge." Jane hesitated before asking the one question that had been weighing on her heart. "Is there still enough for my surgery next year?" Louis' expression softened instantly. He reached over, giving her hand a reassuring squeeze. "Of course. We've been saving, and I promise, when the time comes, you'll get the best care possible. Nothing is more important than that." Jane's lips pressed together, hope flickering in her eyes. "And after the surgery, can we go back to Thailand? Just for a visit?" A brief silence stretched between them. Louis' hands tightened slightly on the wheel. The hesitation was barely noticeable, but Jane caught it. "We'll do our best to save up for a trip," he finally said, his voice warm but measured. "It might take some time, but we'll make it happen." Jane forced a small smile, though deep down, the weight of his words settled in her chest. She wanted to believe him, but something in his tone told her it wasn't that simple. As they pulled up to the school entrance, Jane's stomach clenched. The sight of kids streaming into the building made her shrink back slightly. "What if the teachers don't like me?" she whispered. "What if the other kids are mean?" Rebecca reached back, squeezing Jane's knee. "Honey, look at me. Your dad and I will be here all day. If you need us, any reason at all, we're just a phone call away." Jane inhaled deeply, nodding. As the car rolled to a stop, Lewis turned to her with a small, encouraging smile. "You've got this, kiddo. You're braver than you believe, stronger than your fears, and more loved than you know." Jane swallowed past the lump in her throat, tightening her grip on her backpack straps. This was it. She could do this. At least, she hoped she could. But nothing could have prepared her for what was about to happen that night. Because when a knock came at their front door, and Jane opened it to find the rock standing on her doorstep, her world would never be the same again. "Firm but calm, we don't have to make a big scene," Lou exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. "Fine, but let's be quick about it." Inside the cafeteria, the smell of mashed potatoes and overcooked vegetables filled the air. Students sat in clusters, some laughing, some scrolling through their phones, others eating in silence. Rebecca spotted a staff member near the serving line and approached with a warm smile. "Hi, I was wondering if I could drop this off for my daughter Jane Harper. She's new today, and I thought a little taste of home might make her feel more comfortable." The woman behind the counter gave a small nod. "Sure, what's her lunch period? I'll make sure she gets it." Rebecca's shoulders relaxed. "Thank you so much." As they turned to leave, Rebecca cast a quick glance over the table, scanning for Jane, but she didn't see her. Maybe she was sitting alone, maybe she was in the restroom, or maybe she was already facing the same struggles they feared would follow her to every new school. Back in the car, the silence between them was heavier than before. Lou tapped his fingers against the steering wheel, thinking out loud, "I just hope she's okay." Rebecca sighed, watching the entrance once again, her lips pressed into a thin line. "She will be, she has to be," but deep down neither of them were entirely sure. And while they worried about Jane, she was about to have the most unexpected encounter of her life, because later that evening, when someone knocked on their door and Jane opened it, she never could have imagined standing there in front of her would be Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson himself. What he was about to say would change everything. Before we get to this life-changing moment, comment below where you're watching from, and if you enjoy these emotional stories, make sure to subscribe. Now let's get into it. Laughed again. "I just sat there, I didn't know what to do, I wanted to disappear." Jane's voice broke as fresh tears streamed down her face. Her fingers clenched tightly into the fabric of her mother's shirt. Rebecca's grip on her daughter tightened protectively, her own body trembling with silent fury. Louis placed the last shard of broken glass onto the counter, his movements slow, controlled, but the fire in his eyes was unmistakable. "That's it." His voice was quiet, but firm, laced with barely contained rage. "This is not okay. This is beyond not okay." Rebecca nodded, her jaw set, her mind already racing through what needed to be done. "We're calling the school first thing tomorrow," she said, her voice sharp with determination. "No teacher should humiliate a child like that. I don't care who she is." Jane shook her head frantically. "No, Mom, please don't. They'll just make fun of me more." Her voice cracked with desperation. "If you complain, it's only gonna get worse." Rebecca's heart ached at her daughter's words, at the fear in her voice, the hesitation that told her Jane had already learned that standing up for herself would only bring more trouble. Louis exhaled slowly, kneeling beside them. "Listen to me, sweetheart," he said, his voice softer now, but just as firm. "This isn't about making trouble, this is about respect. No one, and I mean no one, gets to treat you like that, especially not a teacher." Jane sniffled, wiping at her wet cheeks, but she didn't respond. Rebecca took a deep breath, steadying herself. "We'll handle this the right way, okay?" she said gently. "You're not alone in this." Jane swallowed hard, nodding weakly, but the doubt in her eyes was clear. She had spent so long feeling like an outsider, like she didn't belong, and today had only made that feeling worse. And then the knock came. A firm, solid knock at the front door that sent a ripple of confusion through the room. Louis frowned, pushing himself up to his feet, while Rebecca instinctively pulled Jane closer. "Who could that be?" Rebecca murmured, her brows drawn together. Louis moved towards the door, glancing out the peephole before stiffening, his entire posture going rigid. "What?" Rebecca asked, alarmed by his reaction. "Who is it?" Louis blinked once, then twice, before slowly turning back to face them, his expression a mixture of shock, disbelief, and something else, something that almost looked like awe. "It's Dwayne 'The Rock' Johnson," he said, his voice low but steady. Rebecca's breath caught in her throat. Jane's tear-streaked face lifted in confusion, her red-rimmed eyes wide with disbelief. And then another knock sounded through the house, this time accompanied by a deep, familiar voice. "Hey, sorry to just drop in like this, but is Jane home?" For a second, everything stood still. The weight of the day, the pain, the fear, the humiliation, all of it frozen in time as Jane Harper stared at the door, her heart hammering in her chest. And in that moment, she had no idea that what was about to happen next would change her life forever. A moment before hitting post. She wasn't sure what would come of it, but she knew one thing for certain: she couldn't stay silent. Within minutes, the post began gaining traction. Comments of support flooded in, strangers offering words of encouragement, parents sharing similar experiences, and even a few people asking how they could help. Rebecca sat back, watching the numbers climb, her heart pounding. Maybe this would make a difference. Maybe this would reach the right people. And then, just as she was about to close her laptop for the night, her phone buzzed with a notification. A direct message from a verified account. Rebecca's breath caught in her throat as she read the name. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. Her hands trembled as she clicked it open. Hey, Rebecca. Just saw your post about Jane. Tell her to stay strong. And if it's okay with you, I'd love to stop by and meet her. Rebecca's heart pounded. Was this real? Was this actually happening? Before she could even process it, another message popped up. And don't worry. We're gonna fix this, who had taken time out of his day to make a difference in theirs. Jane was still frozen in shock, staring at the Rock as if she were afraid he might disappear if she blinked. Dwayne chuckled softly, reaching out to give her a gentle fist bump. You're way stronger than you know, kid. And you definitely don't deserve what happened at school today. Jane finally managed to breathe, her hands trembling slightly as she returned the fist bump. But why, she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Why did you come? Dwayne's expression grew serious, his gaze steady. Because no one, especially a kid, should ever feel like they're alone in this world. And because bullies? They don't win. Not when you've got people who have your back. He leaned in slightly, lowering his voice as if sharing a secret. And I've got your back, Jane. A small, wobbly smile spread across Jane's face, the first real one since she had walked out of school that day. Rebecca blinked back tears, overwhelmed by the kindness in front of her. She glanced at Louis, who was still standing stiffly beside her, his skepticism slowly giving way to something resembling gratitude. Dwayne clapped his hands together and grinned. Now, I don't just show up empty-handed. He nodded toward his assistant, who handed him a large black duffel bag. I brought you something. Jane's eyes went wide again as Dwayne unzipped the bag and pulled out a custom-made bomber jacket. He held it up, revealing a beautifully embroidered name on the back, Jane the Unbreakable Harper. Jane let out a small gasp, her hands flying to her mouth. I don't know if you're into wrestling, Dwayne said with a wink, but this is a champion's jacket. And after what you went through today, I'd say you've more than earned it. Jane hesitated for only a second before launching herself into a hug, wrapping her arms tightly around him. Dwayne let out a surprised chuckle but hugged her back without hesitation. Thank you, she whispered into his shoulder, her voice thick with emotion. When she pulled away, Dwayne tapped the side of his head. And listen, kid, next time someone calls you a pirate, you tell them this: pirates don't steal. They conquer. And if anyone gives you trouble, just let me know. Jane giggled, wiping her eyes. You'd really come back? Dwayne grinned. You bet. But something tells me you won't need me. You're stronger than you think, Jane. Rebecca felt Louis exhale beside her, finally letting go of whatever doubts he'd been holding onto. As Dwayne stayed for a little while longer, chatting with Jane, joking with Louis, and even trying a bite of Rebecca's stew, damn, Mrs. Harper, you've got skills in the kitchen. The weight that had been pressing down on their family all day began to lift. By the time he left, promising to stay in touch, Jane stood in the doorway wearing her new jacket, beaming brighter than she had in months. And as the door closed behind him, Louis finally let out a breath and turned to Rebecca. Well, he muttered, shaking his head in disbelief, I guess sometimes social media does work miracles. Jane laughed, hugging her parents tightly. And for the first time since moving back to the States, she finally believed, maybe, just maybe, things were going to be okay. Giving her an encouraging smile, remember, You're braver than you think, stronger than you feel, and more loved than you know." Jane took a deep breath, gripping the straps of her backpack. She wanted to believe that today would be different. That the laughter, the whispers, the humiliation wouldn't repeat itself. But as she stepped out of the car and made her way toward the school doors, doubt still lingered in the pit of her stomach. Inside, the hallways buzzed with the usual morning chatter. Jane kept her head down, moving quickly to her locker, hoping to avoid any unwanted attention. But just as she reached it, a familiar voice rang out behind her. Well, if it isn't Pirate Jane." A cold chill ran down her spine as she turned to see a group of students snickering, their eyes locked on her like sharks circling prey. Her fingers clenched around her backpack straps, the humiliation from yesterday threatening to rise up all over again. And then, a hush fell over the hallway. The snickering stopped. The whispers died. The students who had been laughing only seconds ago suddenly looked past Jane, their expressions shifting from amusement to pure shock. Jane frowned, confused by the sudden change in atmosphere. She turned slowly. And there he was. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson stood at the end of the hallway, his massive frame nearly blocking out the light from the entrance. He was dressed sharp but casual, sunglasses in one hand, his signature confident smirk playing on his lips as he strolled toward them. But it wasn't just his presence that silenced the crowd. It was the fact that beside him stood the principal, a couple of school board members, and a camera crew. Jane's heart nearly stopped. The Rock had kept his promise. He was here. For her. "Yo," Dwayne said, his voice booming through the now dead silent hallway as he stopped right beside Jane. He glanced around at the stunned students before looking directly at her. "Jane, tell me something. Who's your favorite wrestler?" Jane's throat was dry, but she somehow managed to stammer out, You? Dwayne grinned. "Good answer." Then, without missing a beat, he turned toward the kids who had been taunting her moments ago, his expression shifting from friendly to something far more intense. "You know," he said, folding his arms, "I used to deal with bullies too. You ever wonder what happens when bullies mess with the wrong person?" Silence. Pure, deafening silence. One of the kids swallowed hard. Another took a small step back. Dwayne's smirk returned as he bent down slightly to Jane's level, speaking just loud enough for the crowd to hear. "You see, Jane, there are two types of people in this world, those who lift others up, and those who try to bring them down." He straightened, his gaze sweeping across the onlookers. "And let me tell you something, I don't like the second type." The principal cleared his throat awkwardly. "Mr. Johnson is here to speak with the school about bullying awareness," he said quickly, trying to regain control of the moment. "He's also taking the time to personally mentor Jane for the day, which we are honored to have." Jane blinked. "Mentor me?" Dwayne clapped a hand on her shoulder. "That's right, kid. You and me, we're gonna walk through this school together. And by the end of today, you're gonna see that you don't need me to stand tall, you can do it all on your own." The whispers in the hallway started up again, but this time, they weren't mocking. They weren't cruel. They were amazed. Jane felt her heart pound as she glanced up at the Rock, his confidence radiating like a force field around him. And for the first time since she had started at this school, she felt something different. She felt powerful. As Dwayne led her down the hallway, students stepping aside like the parting of the Red Sea, Jane Harper realized something. She wasn't just surviving today. She was winning it. Jane inhaled deeply, steadying herself as Dwayne's words echoed in her mind. "You're strong, you're brave, and you're not alone." She clutched the straps of her backpack and swung open the car door, stepping onto the pavement with newfound determination. Behind her, in the driver's seat, Louie gripped the steering wheel a little tighter, while Rebecca watched her daughter's retreating figure with a mixture of pride and concern. They both knew that this day had the power to change everything, for better or worse. As Jane disappeared into the school, Rebecca let out a slow breath, then reached for her phone. The moment the screen lit up, her eyes widened in shock. Her social media post had gone viral. Over 20,000 comments, shares, and likes flooded her notifications. Messages of support poured in from all over the world. Parents, teachers, former victims of bullying, everyone was rallying behind Jane. Rebecca's grip on her phone tightened. "This can't wait. I'm speaking to the principal," she said suddenly, her voice firm. Louis hesitated. "Shouldn't we wait for Dwayne?" Rebecca shook her head. "No. I need to do this now." She pushed open the car door before Louis could protest further and strode toward the school entrance. The flood of messages in her inbox had done more than just move her, it had given her courage. "We're not alone in this fight." Inside the administrative office, Principal Harway sat behind a cluttered desk, his gray eyebrows raised in mild surprise as Rebecca entered. He gestured toward a chair. "Mrs. Harper," he greeted smoothly. "What can I do for you this morning?" Rebecca sat down, back straight, eyes locked on his. "I'm here about what happened to my daughter, Jane, yesterday. The incident with Mrs. Roselle." Harway's practiced smile remained, but something in his posture shifted. Yes. I was briefed on the situation," he said, leaning back in his chair. "I assure you, Mrs. Harper, we take all reports of bullying very seriously." Rebecca folded her arms, unimpressed. "If that were true, my daughter wouldn't have spent yesterday sobbing in the principal's office, humiliated in front of her entire class." Harway exhaled, adjusting his glasses. First days can be stressful, and sometimes past traumas can color our perceptions of events. "I'm sure Mrs. Roselle had no intention of." Rebecca's voice rose, steel in her tone. "She forced my daughter to be a punching bag for another student." Harway lifted his hands in a placating gesture. "Now, let's not overcomplicate things. I'm sure if we sit down with Mrs. Roselle and Jane, we can clear this all up." Before Rebecca could snap back, the door burst open. The school secretary, breathless and wide-eyed, gasped out 4 words that sent a shockwave through the room. "Mr. Harway, Dwayne Johnson is here." The principal paled. For the first time, his polished confidence faltered. Rebecca suppressed a triumphant smirk. "Now, let's see you brush this off." Outside, Dwayne Johnson stood near the entrance, towering over the gathered staff and curious students. His presence was magnetic, his posture relaxed, yet commanding. The moment he spotted Louis, he shook his hand firmly. "I'm here for Jane," he said without preamble, his tone leaving no room for argument. Harway stepped forward, clearing his throat. "Mr. Johnson, this is quite unexpected. Perhaps we could discuss this in my office." Dwayne's brows lifted slightly. "I'd rather talk to the teacher responsible." He turned, scanning the building. "Now." With no choice but to comply, Harway led him toward Jane's classroom. The moment they stepped inside, all chatter ceased. Students froze in their seats, eyes widening. Mrs. Roselle, standing at the front of the room, turned pale as she realized who had just walked in. Dwayne's gaze settled on her. "Mrs. Roselle," he said evenly, his voice carrying across the silent room. "I'd like to have a word with you about Jane Harper." The teacher swallowed hard. I'm not sure what you mean," she stammered. "Yesterday was just a normal class activity." Rebecca stepped forward, her voice sharp. "A normal class where you made fun of my daughter's eye patch and forced her to be beaten up for amusement?" A ripple of whispers spread through the class. Mrs. Roselle's face flushed red. I didn't mean." Dwayne's eyes flicked upward. "Is that a security camera?" Harway hesitated before nodding. "Yes, we have cameras in every classroom." Dwayne's smirk was brief. "Perfect. Then we can review the footage." A heavy silence followed. Mrs. Roselle's face drained of color. Her voice dropped to a whisper. I may have gone too far." Dwayne's expression hardened. "Intent doesn't erase impact. What you did wasn't just too far, it was wrong." Turning to the class, he continued, "Real strength isn't about putting others down. It's about lifting them up. His gaze swept over the students, some of whom had been laughing at Jane the day before. You all have a choice every day, to be someone who builds people up, or someone who tears them down. Something shifted in the air. Even the students who had found Jane's pain amusing now looked uneasy. By the time the bell rang, they were on their feet, applauding. Outside, news cameras had already arrived, reporters crowding the school gates. Dwayne stepped forward, facing them with the same confidence that had silenced a room full of students. "I'm here today because of a brave young girl named Jane Harper," he began. "And because bullying, whether from students or teachers, is never acceptable." Principal Harway, now visibly uncomfortable, was forced to address the cameras. "We will be reviewing our anti-bullying policies and ensuring better training for our staff," he announced. "The teacher involved will face disciplinary action, pending investigation." Dwayne nodded. "That's a start. But real change happens when we all take responsibility, to stand up when we see injustice, to protect those who need it." He glanced down at Jane. "To speak up." The crowd's attention turned to her. For a moment, she hesitated. Then, heart-pounding, she took a step forward. "If you're being bullied, don't be afraid to speak up," she said, voice steady despite the nerves. "And if you see someone else being bullied, don't stay silent." The crowd erupted in applause. Dwayne gave her shoulder a reassuring squeeze. "That's what I'm talking about." As the press conference wrapped up, Dwayne turned to the Harpers. "This isn't just about today. It's about making sure things actually change. I'll be checking in." Rebecca, still processing everything, could only nod. "Thank you," she whispered. Dwayne grinned, giving Jane one last fist bump. "You're stronger than you know, kid." And with that, he was gone. But Jane stood taller than before. The fear, the doubt, it wasn't gone, but it no longer controlled her. Because for the first time in a long time, she believed in something. She wasn't alone. And she never would be again.